In the previous videos, what you've seen is kind of the general concepts of the workflow between working, in this case, with Subdivide and ZBrush and normal mapping. So we've seen some very basic examples just to kind of get your feet wet with it and get you introduced to the workflow. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put those ideas and those sort of practices to use, and I'm going to go ahead and do an advanced example of how to create actual, final game assets here for a next-gen sort of game by using sculpting with ZBrush, and we're going to be using Subdivide as well. Okay, so let's open up an example scene here. We're going to open up a scene called 13_start. So let's open that up, and you should see something like this. It's basically just a wall object here from my warehouse scene, and you can see here the topology. It's pretty simple. It's very low res. As you can see in my stats, it's only 354 triangles. So it's pretty low res. It's basically made up of two sections, or two components if you want to think of it that way. The wall piece here, which has some polygons that I pretty much chipped in through to create these holes. And we've also got these objects here called rebar, which is basically these sort of metal bars that are usually found inside of concrete walls and things like that, that just keep the wall together and stuff. I'm not a construction worker. From an artistic point of view, is that usually when you break in through a concrete wall, you will see something inside the concrete wall that looks similar to this. So you can see it's just these sort of cylinders that are kind of bent out of shape, made to look realistic and believable in the wall. Okay, and they only have about 792 triangles, so it's not too bad. What we're going to do starting now is we're going to create a base mesh, which we're going to take the ZBrush and we're going to do something similar. We're not going to do the same exact wall here. We're going to go in ZBrush and we're going to go ahead and sculpt a high-res, high-detail model to see if we can do something that looks a little more convincing and a little more advanced. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So to start, it's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to go to Polygon Mesh and get myself a grid. And then I'm going to rotate this grid 90 degrees like this so that it's facing this way. And if I pull this grid out and see what it looks like, I'm going to turn on headlight mode over here so I can see a little bit better. In terms of the size for the U and the V, I think what I'll do is maybe I'll make this 10 and 10, or you can maybe even make it 12 and 12 or whatever you want. I'm going to keep it like this. I think 10 and 10 will work out just fine. And in terms of subdivisions, I'm going to leave it at 8 and 8. I think that's going to work out just fine as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, this mesh that has all this geometry, and I'm just going to select an area. So basically what I want to do is select a group of polygons that's going to represent where the hole in the wall is going to be. A hole created by maybe an explosion a long time ago. Maybe it's just a broken down building that just happens to have a hole. So you don't want the hole to be perfect, so you don't want to grab, for example, 4 polygons in the middle like that. You maybe want to randomize this a little bit. So select some of these polygons. I'm just going to go sort of a random pattern here, so to speak. So I'll select some of these polygons and do something maybe like this would look pretty good. Okay, so you could select any sort of random selection of polygons you want. I think I'm going to go with something like this. Make it look pretty random looking like this. Will look just fine. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to delete those polygons, basically punch a hole right into the object. I'm going to place this guy back at 0 in the Z. Also, I'm going to go ahead and take this original sample object and I'm going to hide it just so it's not in my way anymore. And I'm going to go into the top view here and I'm going to move this guy about right there. Then I'm going to go into my context menu and I'm going to select Symmetrize Polygons. And I'm going to symmetrize in the Z axis. And I'm going to go back to my top view, lock this PPG down. Instead of the weld option, I'm going to use bridge over here, so I'm going to select bridge. If I go back to my camera view, you can see that when I have bridge selected, what it's going to do is it's basically going to bridge those polygons and put them together, which is exactly what I want it to do. And then I can take the offset here and I can increase it a bit to make the wall a little bit thicker. I want it to be a lot thicker than it was before. So let me increase that distance to a pretty good amount. So by changing the offset, you make the wall thicker or thinner. I'm going to go with something that looks about like this. I think would look pretty good, pretty convincing for the wall. So something like that looks pretty good. Let me freeze modeling on that. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to subdivide this with subd's here inside of Subdivide. And if I look at this, right now it's kind of a blobby mess. Doesn't look too good, so we're going to have to do some tweaking here. So pretty simple. We're basically just preparing the low-res mesh right now for ZBrush, and we're doing that by creating a low-res mesh that has enough geometry to hold the shape. So when we take it to ZBrush and we subdivide it in ZBrush, because that's essentially what ZBrush does, it subdivides like subd's. When we subdivide it in ZBrush, we end up with a shape here, or an object that can actually hold the shape very accurately to what we intend. So something like that. I'm also going to come in here, take this edge ring right there. I'm going to split it evenly, and then I'm going to take the split that's in the middle. You can see that one right there. And I'm just going to bevel that. I'm going to bevel it a good amount, something like that. When I subdivide this, I get sharper edges. I don't want them to be too ridiculously sharp, but I do want them to hold the shape a little bit better. Okay, so that looks a little bit better, but the hole still looks a little bit too round. It's a little too organic at the moment, which I don't like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fix some of these curved edges by adding more edge loops here. It's a fast and simple way of just coming in here and getting this done. I'm going to add another edge loop over here, so I'll do a split with split control. It's one of the easiest ways to add these extra edge loops. I'm going to come in here, split down the middle, then I'm going to take that loop, make sure I have the whole loop selected, and I'm going to bevel that. Sometimes you'll see me use bevel simply because it's faster and easier to create one edge loop and then bevel it to the edges, as opposed to trying to use the split control tool over and over again. And then we just have one more area here that I want to sharpen up a bit. Like I said, you don't want to worry about these edge loops too much. Don't waste too much time on it. Just get the overall shape and form, something like this. Because in ZBrush we'll be able to modify the shape with a lot of its tools. Okay, so basically all I care about is doing a base model, which I already have. This is going to work out just fine. So I'm going to take this guy, freeze modeling on it. I'm also going to rename it. I'm just going to call this damaged wall or whatnot. Doesn't really matter at this point. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to export it to OBJ. Now, you might be wondering if we need UVs on this. Depending on the workflow and techniques you use, you may have to add UVs, you may not. If I look right now, I don't have any UVs on this, okay? The workflow I'm going to show you right now doesn't require that you UV map this object, which is good because that saves time and work, okay? But there are some workflows. Be aware that there are workflows where you can take objects that are UV mapped, take them to ZBrush, and normal map them inside of ZBrush. In this case, for this workflow, it's going to work out a little bit simpler in this particular case to just take this guy without any UV map or anything and just take him into ZBrush and sculpt them. And then we're going to bring them back into Subdivide. Go to Export, OBJ file. Go ahead and export it out. I like to put it in my models directory as usual. That seems to be like the best one. I'm going to call it damaged wall from XSI. It just makes sense. It's easier to manage that way. In this case, I already had a file with that name. I'm going to override it. And for geometry options and all this stuff, I'm not going to export a material file. And we don't even have any UV, so it really doesn't even matter if we check this on or off. So, there you go. All the other default options are fine. I'm going to hit OK and export this out. Done. Okay, we're finished here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have this imported in ZBrush, and I'm going to get started on sculpting.